For many years, Canada was seen as one of the closest partners of the United States, sharing not only the longest peaceful border in the world, but also deep economic ties, cultural connections, and political cooperation that shaped daily life in both countries, often without people even thinking about it. Canadians grew up watching American television, trading with American companies, and traveling easily across the border, while the United States relied on Canada as a stable neighbor, a trusted ally, and an important economic partner, making the relationship feel natural and permanent. At the same time, far away across the Pacific Ocean, China was quietly changing, growing from a developing country into one of the most powerful economies in the world, expanding its influence through trade, manufacturing, technology, and international investment, slowly becoming impossible to ignore. As China's economy grew, countries around the world began to see new opportunities, and Canada was no exception, as Chinese demand for natural resources, food products, and consumer goods created the possibility of economic growth that many Canadian businesses found difficult to resist. For a while, it seemed possible for Canada to enjoy strong relationships with both the United States and China, benefiting from American partnership while also expanding trade with China. Believing that balance was not only possible but smart in a globalized world. However, as competition between the United States and China intensified, especially around technology, security, and global leadership, countries like Canada found themselves under increasing pressure, forced to make difficult decisions in situations where there were no perfect answers. One event that brought this tension into sharp public focus was the arrest of a Chinese technology executive in Canada, following a request from the United States, an action that placed Canada directly in the middle of a growing conflict between two global powers. Canada's government argued that it was simply following the rule of law, yet China strongly disagreed, responding with anger and diplomatic pressure. And soon after, Canadian citizens were detained in China, turning a legal issue into a deeply emotional and political crisis. As weeks turned into months and then years, many Canadians began to ask uncomfortable questions, wondering whether being caught between powerful countries was worth the cost, and whether Canada truly had the freedom to act independently in such situations. At the same time, trade tensions between the United States and Canada added to the uncertainty, as tariffs, disagreements, and political rhetoric made some Canadians feel that even long-standing friendships could change quickly in a world driven by national interests. These moments caused Canadian leaders to think more carefully about economic dependency, asking whether relying too heavily on one partner, even a friendly one, could create vulnerability in times of conflict or political change. China, with its massive market and growing global influence, appeared to offer an alternative path, not as a replacement for the United States, but as a way to diversify relationships and reduce risk, an idea that appealed to many businesses and policymakers. Yet moving closer to China also raised serious concerns, including questions about human rights, political influence, national security, and the long-term consequences of economic dependence on a country with a very different political system. Public opinion in Canada became divided, with some people arguing that economic opportunity should not be ignored, while others warn that short-term benefits could lead to long-term loss of independence and values. Meanwhile, ordinary Canadians felt the effects of these global tensions in simple ways. Through higher prices, trade disruptions, and news stories that made the world feel more unstable and unpredictable than before, Canada's government responded by talking more openly about diversification, not only toward China, but also toward Europe, Asia, and other regions, trying to build a network of relationships that would allow flexibility rather than dependence. This approach was not about choosing China over the United States or rejecting old alliances, but about adapting to a world where power is shifting and where middle-sized countries must think carefully about how to protect their interests. Still, media headlines often simplified the situation, asking dramatic questions about loyalty and choice, even though the reality was far more complex and involved careful negotiation behind closed doors. Canadian officials continued to repeat that their goal was balance, stability, and respect for international rules. Yet every decision was closely watched by both allies and critics, creating pressure that few leaders could ignore. As the global economy continued to change, supply chains shifted, and political alliances became less predictable. Canada's situation began to reflect a broader global challenge faced by many countries caught between competing powers. This story is not only about Canada, China, and the United States, but about the modern world itself, where economic opportunity, political values, and national security often pull in different directions at the same time. For smaller and middle-sized countries, the challenge is especially difficult, as they must protect their people, support their economies, and maintain independence without the power to control global events. Canada's experience shows how decisions made at the international level can quietly shape everyday life, influencing jobs, prices, and national conversations in ways that are not always immediately visible. As tensions between major powers continue to rise and fall, Canada's choices remind us that diplomacy is rarely about clear winners and losers, but about managing risk, compromise, and uncertainty over long periods of time. The question many Canadians continue to ask is not whether their country should choose one side or another, but how it can remain strong, respected, and independent in a world where powerful nations compete for influence. And this question is not limited to Canada alone. As many countries around the world face similar challenges, watching global shifts carefully and wondering how best to protect their future. Perhaps the most important lesson in this story is that global politics is not only about leaders and agreements, but about ordinary people whose lives are shaped by decisions made far beyond their control. So as we listen to this story, we might ask ourselves a final question. In a world divided by competition and uncertainty, how can countries work together while still protecting their own values and independence? And for English learners listening today, this story offers not only language practice, but a reminder that understanding the world also means understanding the difficult choices that shape it.